All right, Jared. So, what's the t-shirt of the day?
It's a assorted tax, dead tax one.
Just the dad text,
Yeah,
just the
it's nothing new.
constant. Nothing new. I'm probably gonna have to then just buy you some and send you some t-shirts.
Don't do that. I've got some things saved in my phone because I got a t-shirt company that makes graphic tees for me, and I've got some pictures of some example t-shirts that I want to have them make for me. I just haven't got them the images yet, but they're coming. They are coming.
That doesn't sound bougie at all. You have a t-shirt company that makes
Well, the
t-shirts.
t-shirts. Let's be honest. First of all, they're like $7. Okay, so we're talking about a max of 25 to make a t-shirt. So it's not bougie at all. It's more. I have some images and some t-shirts that I find myself laughing at, and I don't really care if anybody else laughs at them, but I will. So so yeah.
There you go. All right. And I am in my one of my two favorite colors, which is black. So it's black or white, sometimes navy blue if I'm spicing it up.
I'm a big fan of black and white, and I like. We don't even buy cars with colors. Like I want a black or white car, and that's pretty much it. I get that from that aspect for sure.
That's funny. We both drive black cars too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's either black or white. I don't want anything with any colors. And I went to the dealership last time, and I was like, listen, I don't want a color. And I had to order this car, and I had to wait on it. So it was one of those things where they were like, hey, we've got this car come in. It's not exactly what you want, but come look at it. And I was like, this better not be red, blue, or anything like yellow or orange or weird burnt something.
Lime
So
green.
yeah, yeah. So it was black. It didn't have the captain's chairs in the middle like I wanted, but God, I didn't want to wait another 9 months for a car. So
Car, truck, or minivan? Because you guys are kid phase.
yeah, well, my wife refuses to buy a minivan, even though I've pushed for it. But we at one point in time had five vehicles for two of us to drive, so we've downsized a little bit. We have three now, but we're back in the market for a suburban or something suburban like
Yeah.
because my wife refuses to take the kids and dogs and stuff places that require a big vehicle. We got rid of our expedition a couple years ago, but we shouldn't have gotten rid of that either way.
Yeah, those are nice. And the Suburbans are nice. I mean, they're good. That's good for when the kids have all that crap and they're young and
Oh my!
uh
And you know where I beta tested this is in Vegas when we were teaching in Vegas at the Taxposium. My staff and I got that Airbnb, so we were driving back and forth and Ubering back and forth, and we got expeditions, we got Suburbans. The Suburban has the much bigger back end, so like the
yes.
trunk space.
Yes, which you need. Like
A
I
hundred
never
percent.
understood when they have the big five seaters and then the back trunk is like this big. And they're like, I'm like, what are you putting back here?
Yeah, two bags of groceries and a bag of peas. That's it. That's all you can put back there.
That's it. Nothing fits. No amount of kid equipment, nothing. So all right. So we diving in. Let's talk fun taxes, right? That's what we
Yeah,
do.
as fun as we can make it, right?
It's-
That is by definition of what we do, right? In
That's
in,
right.
in real life.
And that's it. And we are doing our best to make it not as boring as people think it is, maybe, or at least it's fun to us. So, we'll
Some
just keep
some
going.
parts, right?
Right.
Some parts are fun.
Okay. So we started last week. We did our little three. What are we going to do? A three-part series on what we wish taxpayers need to know. So today we're going to move all about small business owners. And we kind of started on this last week, but I really think we're going to focus on what we think small business owners need to know this week. So we're going to talk some key planning questions, particularly for this year with all these changes. And then other just general mistakes, because I think sometimes people forget that we're also entrepreneurs ourselves, and we have seen a lot of small business owners that make a lot of mistakes. Some of them
Oh
are
yeah.
not necessarily tax related, but we're like the person on the sideline that's like, what is just happening? Please stop.
Well, unfortunately, we're the ones that usually see the culmination of the year of mistakes, right? Because we're always the one seeing the 1,000 foot view of what they did for that year. And, you know, in a microcosm, it's just kind of like, what were you, some of these situations, you're like, what were you thinking? What were you doing? So yeah, totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. And then we'll end with some horror stories, which is always kind of a favorite, just to make sure that people see under the hood of like what not to do.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Okay, well then I'll let you start. We start with small business owners, and we'll kind of talk about what we wish our taxpayers knew if they are small business owners. So like, what don't they know? What's your big takeaway when you meet either existing or brand new baby business owners? What do you think they're sitting blind to?
Well, I think that, and I'm going to try to keep this short-winded. Um, I'm gonna use it like a movie quote for a purpose. Okay, you've probably never seen the movie The Gambler. It's got Mark Wahlberg, John Goodman in it. Mark Wahlberg is like a degenerate, and he's gambled a bunch of money away, and he went to John Goodman, a bookie, to try to get more money. And John Goodman has this kind of goes off on this little tangent that basically says, you know, most guys when they get $1 million up, they stop. They go put that money in the bank, and then for lack of a better term, they have what's called FU money. You know, your boss ticks you off, FU, I'm done. And I'm not going to keep hammering on the FU part, but basically, business owners that I think that I see kind of regularly, they struggle with the idea of they never want to pay any tax, right? So they want to write off, buy, do all kinds of things. Well, our tax code is really set up for you to have profits and for it to be successful in this world as an entrepreneur. You have to have capital. You have to have that, for lack of a better term, FU money. You know what I mean? And let's face it, in real life, like I think people and entrepreneurs, because they are the same, we focus too much on where we're going to get more money rather than how we're spending that money. Entrepreneurs are no different. And a lot of times they think to themselves, deductions, deductions, deductions. Where can I get more of it? In reality, not every deduction is created equal. You know what I mean? So I'm not against paying off debt. I'm not against paying things off, but that deduction is limited to your interest rate. So if you paid $1,000 against a credit card, you might get I don't know, $20 deduction, something like that. So to me, loans and things like that, I guess the one common mistake I wish business owners would understand is not all deductions are created equal, and not all deductions are great for long-term purposes, and it's not always about eliminating your profit to not pay any tax, because I would much rather have a business owner that has capital in the bank that has, for lack of a better term, FU money, because things are less problematic in your mind. You're not as worried about meeting payroll. You're not as worried about buying a new asset. You know what I mean? Taxes are something we all want to save on, but at the end of the day, there are some taxes that are good to pay for long-term purposes. So I think that from a long-winded answer, I think that business owners make the mistake that they're so focused on their deductions and maybe not the right ones. And I think they're so focused on never paying tax that we miss some of the benefits that we could have if we had profits, if we had these things that we had money or capital to do those things with.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point, because the problem for so many people who venture into being self-employed, and we've kind of unpacked a little bit of that as we start. Sometimes people are reluctant starting, sometimes they're sort of semi-forced into it due to a job change or a career change, and then sometimes they're just those people that are chaos and the ones that are just running headlong into the wind and are probably going to change the world. But everybody has this hyper aversion to tax, and they don't understand how little in some cases it actually is. They just sort of start with this, and I get it. I mean, because trust me, and I'm sure just like nobody hates taxes more than me.
Oh, I would argue that I might rival you in that moment, but that's all right.
I absolutely despise paying any amount of tax. Like I absolutely hate it, because I don't think the government's a better steward of our money than we are. And I think, so all that aside, there are ways, or there's such a low number sometimes that people start with the wrong premise, like, I don't want to pay any tax. And
Right.
and I think that makes them make decisions, and they start small businesses that hurt them. And to your point, I mean, it's sometimes I don't want to show any income. Well, that's great, except then you're like, oh, I can't get a loan.
Yeah.
I've been self-employed for 3 years, and the bank won't give me a loan for a house. Well, because you continue to write off every cent that you make, and while that works, maybe as long as everything's legitimate, you also are never going to get any capital to move forward. And yeah, we need capital. Cash is still king. Capital lets deals happen, businesses thrive and things like that. So yeah, there's this I think, reliance on the elimination of tax that starts people off, so scared. And if you look at just the raw dollars and you're like, hey, actually, okay, this is what you're going to pay. And effectively you're paying, I don't know, 7% of your money in taxes. And then when you say it that way, they're like, what? That's it? Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel, because everybody thinks, oh, I'm self-employed, I'm going to pay 50% in taxes. And I'm not saying, there's some people that make a ton of money and we can't do anything else. And yes, they pay a ton of money in taxes, but there's equally as many people on the other end. They're so afraid of a boogeyman that kind of doesn't exist.
Well, I know we got some things that we want to jump into, and I just kind of wanted to marry a thought. Like, when I talk about deductions, and I think when you marry somebody who is profitable, and you marry them with, not obviously in matrimony, but in our profession, if you put them with somebody that basically knows how to take what you are already doing in life and make some of these things deductible. Like the perfect example, I'm sure you work with a ton of Schedule C, single member LLC, sole proprietors, right? And sometimes they get hit the hardest and they don't know it's coming because they have little to no organization. They have little to no knowledge of what their tax situation looks like. But one of the things that when we're kind of talking about in the same vein of what don't they know, this is a perfect example of finding something in life that you're already paying for. And what I'm referring to, Kelly, is HRAs. Like the perfect example here for anybody that's out there listening, if you want a Schedule C business and you're married and your spouse holds the health insurance through her W-2 job or their W-2 job. I don't want to sound that no females, no wives, no spouses are entrepreneurs. But anyways, I'll digress here. And they hold the
Showing
W.
your inner misogyny, I see.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry. Anyways, there's nothing to see here. Look away. Let's say that they hold the W-2 and they held the insurance. If the entrepreneur would put them on payroll, it doesn't have to be a lot of payroll. It could just be some payroll for the year. And then invest in what's called an HRA. Now we've taken all of our medical costs, our premiums, our deductibles, our out-of-pocket, our prescriptions, and now we've made those deductible on the business, whereas these people are not writing off any of that medical stuff probably anyways. So marrying a good tax pro with somebody who's an entrepreneur that we can find little deductions that you're already paying for in life, but now we've made it a way to be deductible. That's the perfect marriage between business owners and making deductions actually worth it because you are already going to pay for those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a line I use frequently when somebody says, what is deductible? And I say the question is not what, it is how do we make this deductible? And
Right.
they'll usually come with like they have a pre-prescribed idea of what they want to write off, and I'll flip that and say, okay, well, let's talk about whether or not what you're doing either has or could have a business purpose. And then if so, then we just need to move the exact same thing you were going to spend money on into the business bucket by, changing either the nature of the operation. So just to your point, like we have to do some of the things behind the scenes, like we might have to set up these HRA plans and things like that. But we can take the exact same dollars you're already spending and make them deductible to your business in a way that doesn't affect your family's cash flow. And
Right.
so you spent the same money. but again, you have to know what all of those things are, and you can't just, kind of, I don't know, just guess. And so I like that too, is like some of these things are things you're already doing. I know another one for me is a lot of people have a really weird, and I don't know, is this like, was there an audit of people with home offices before our time?
Yeah, well, here's okay. Yes. So a person to maybe talk to on this, maybe Amy Bronson, but she sees more of these audits than probably you or I do.
Yeah.
But my opinion is like I've heard a lot of. I don't know if you've noticed this in some of the sessions that I've been teaching across the country. I feel like there's a resurgence of attendees that are former IRS agents. I'm seeing way more IRS agents in my sessions now than I was 5 years ago. Either because they've left the IRS or retired or whatever it may be. But I've met a lot of auditors that were business Schedule C, Schedule E, Schedule F auditors. And I've heard some horror stories personally from these people that when they've gone in because somebody's taken a full-blown 8829, which is your home office deduction, that they've walked into these houses and find a dog bed, and they've thrown out all of that deduction for 10 years. So it's kind of like I always liken this situation like when you were a kid, you're going to mom and she says no, but you go to dad and they say yes. So it all depends on which auditor you get, right? And anyway, the long and the short of it is reasonable and customary is what we like to use in the tax industry, right? So some auditors will look at this and be like, that's not a big deal. Some auditors will look at this and be like, nope, we're nailing this person to the wall. So it really comes down to who do you get in that moment. But yeah, I think that there were some people that were using the full-blown 8829, writing off that home office and every deduction that we could. I think the frequency of audits for home office has gone way down because we've gotten that simplified method. Because in all reality, the IRS doesn't want to spend time or money sending an auditor to Timbuktu out in the sticks to someone's house, right? They don't want to do that. But I think that if something looks egregious on paper, it probably is.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's where it's, we could liken the home office, because for some reason everybody always starts with, oh, I don't want to write off my home office because it's a red flag. And I always say, well, it's not a red flag so long as you don't make it one. But if you are going to try to write off, 95% of your house as a home office, I would say you darn well better have a good
Yeah.
support for how that's valid. But even so, the flip side is I see people that are a little bit too conservative though, and say, well, I don't want to write off anything because it's a red flag. And I always say, well, it is a legitimate business expense that we're allowed to take by the code. And so why would you want to overpay the government when you are validly working from home, you have the designated space and all of that, I'm sitting in my home office now. Like, why would you not want to write that off if you can?
Right.
So I think people, like, for some reason, we go a little bit where I think they're a little afraid, but there are very valid ways to write off your home office, and you should. Not that this is massive dollars that's changing anybody's life, but it's still something, right?
Right. Absolutely. But it comes back to the exact same thing you said. What can I defend?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't defend 90% of a business use of a home. There's just no way to do that. You know what I mean? 15, 20, 30%, probably. Unless you're using, like you're in an entire separate structure or a separate part of your house for storage. And I've seen it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like, what can you defend? What can you honestly say at the end of the day? I'm legitimately using this place of my home for this purpose, and I'm using it not periodically. I'm using it constantly.
Right.
So, home
Well, we
office.
should take home office. So some people should be a little more, little less scared of the red flag. What else? What other things do you think business owners leave kind of meat on the bone with as far as deductions and don't take, likely because they're not keeping track of things?
Mileage is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, as a business owner, and Kelly, you and I have talked about this in the past. I know who I am as a business owner. I am chaos. I know that. I understand it. I agree to it. I also know that there are apps out there. So let me just say this way for my own business, because I've got 3 offices, and one office is an hour and 15 minutes from my house. One office is like 4 minutes from my house, and one office is 2.5 hours from my house. And I was driving every single one of these like on a regular basis, and I was driving the crap out of my car. So we bought a company car for that purpose. Now I still have to track mileage, but prior to this new car, I couldn't use an app because I suck at pushing the button to say this is a business trip. So what I used was paper, and I know that sounds super terrible, but I'll bet yours and my life is always dictated by the calendar, right? We know where we're going. We know what we're doing for the most part because there is a scheduler. So I would get an actual piece of paper handbook or notebook and go back to my calendar a couple of days later and say, oh crap, I forgot that I need to take mileage from point A to point B. And I never tracked it as well as I could because I could not use the app. But a lot of entrepreneurs are really, really good at pushing the button on their app. Okay. I just know who I am. I suck at it. So before I had a company car, it was a struggle even for me. I'm in this industry for goodness sakes, and I forget to make sure I claim all my mileage. I think mileage is a big one. And I think that it doesn't get the attention or the due diligence that it probably should, because that's a pretty big deduction. I mean, if you think about it, if you owned a company that you're traveling all over God's green earth for, look at the mileage deduction, 70 cents a mile. And unless you're driving a F-350 pulling an excavator, you're probably not spending 70 cents a mile on stuff. So I think that's a big one for me, at least. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, you can, and I think it's probably a microcosm of the time of the year, because right now we're still dealing with some of our business owners that are on extension because they're don't have all their stuff together. What's the one thing we're all waiting on right now? Mileage.
Yeah, I think same thing. I think for some reason some people think that this mileage deduction is a red flag. And it's always about the reasonable representation of it. So if you are okay, your case and example, like you have 3 office locations. I know you as a client, you come in, you're like, hey, I have 3 different locations. Probably home base from home. And then I go depending on the day. Plus I also speak and I travel for that. Plus I don't know, maybe, like me, I do, you do networking, you do events, whatever. You come to me and say, I drove 20,000 miles last year. I don't blink an eye.
Nope.
You are somebody who comes in and you're like, oh, I started this brand new consulting business and I earned $4,000 and I drove 36,000 even miles. I'm like, you're full of crap.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like, just be legitimate about it. And it's not right. I mean, so I think there's that discretion that people lose, like, oh, what can I get away with? And I'm like, how about just do what you actually did, and you might be surprised if you do the right thing. The number might actually surprise you if you just kept track of it per a calendar. I think early in my days, now this was when I was with, my kids were little, so they were in like sports and travel, and then was really, really actively growing my business. We expanded to the 2 offices at that time. I was all over the place. I was putting almost 40,000 miles a year on my car. Mm-hmm. So when my business mileage was, it's gone down now, but like when my business mileage was over 20,000 miles a year, that was not questionable at all.
Right.
Because the car was putting 40,000 miles in, and I thought, geez, oh man, how I'm sitting in this car so much.
Well, that's when you're like, I've listened to podcasts all the time. And you're like, Jared, why don't you listen to podcasts? You're driving all over God's green earth. And I want to tie this back to the home office too.
Why don't you listen to podcasts, Jared?
I'm a sports radio kind of guy. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but okay. I listen wherever I drive. I'm listening to sports radio, and I'm consuming that every time I'm on the road.
Okay.
But coming back, one of the things that business owners don't realize is that coming back to home office. Okay. So I'm going to mentally draw a picture here. Let's say that point A is your home, point B is your first location, your first office, or your first job, and then point C is another location that you may have to drive to go get things, whatever, and then from C to A. So A to B, B to C, C to A. So taxpayers don't realize a lot of times if they don't have the home office, the trip from their home to B is not deductible. From B to C is the only thing deductible. But if they have that office, that home office, then point A to point B is deductible, B to C is deductible, and C back to A is deductible. So that's a good tie-in between business deductions that maybe people are losing, is that mileage plus home office is a huge benefit, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize. But once again, it goes back to, can you justify the home office? And I don't know many business owners that don't have a potential situation where they should be writing off home office because they've got the records there. They may have payroll information there. They may have sensitive information. Even if they have a storefront or an office space, they don't want their employees to have access to those things, or they don't want to do that work there at location. So I'm not afraid of the home office, but I think that sometimes, like you said, it's kind of, there are tax professionals out there that are terrified to put a home office deduction on a tax return. But if they don't have that, they're missing out on the mileage piece too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So they could have a podcast studio in their home office.
Yeah, I'm not in a home office, but you are, so it's cool.
I didn't know which office are you in?
I'm in the Ostrianer one right now, and this is pretty much. And I spent the entire morning freaking out because I've had all these updates, and I didn't know if this computer was going to turn on today for this podcast. But here we are, by the grace of God. And
I'm in my home office, which is about the size of a postage stamp. So my home office square footage is about this big because
yeah,
I don't know what this thing used to be, but my home office is very tiny, but it works. So
I can tell you that I don't take a home office. I do an accountable reimbursement plan for things like that because it's an S corp, and it varies on which entity tax wise that you are. That might change some of this stuff, but that's for another conversation for another day. But I'm not saying I don't use my home office because full transparency, I've got not hard copies, but it's kind of our hub. My home office is my hub where all of our digital footprint kind of stays, if that makes any sense.
yeah, I mean, particularly with multiple offices, it's hard because you are all over the place. And so I'm the same thing. Back at home in the quiet of my home office is actually where I can get a lot more stuff done because everybody's not asking me questions.
Yeah, I got kids and dogs at home right now, so
Right.
it's a little bit opposite for me, but I get what you're saying.
I got dogs and cats and cows, so all right, let's speaking of family members and kiddos, I think this is one that gets a little bit of internet press, gets done really interestingly, and love it or hate it. Can we employ our family members? And this one always gets a lot of questions, I think, from small business owners. And what do you think is kind of the big thing that people overlook when we're talking about employing family members?
Well, for me, it's the same thing we've already discussed. It's what can I defend, right? I'm not going to ask my 6-year-old Kendall to go answer the phones and set appointments. That's not reasonable, right? She's 6. Now, granted, if you sat down with my daughter Kendall and you asked her one question, you'd spend the next 45 minutes regretting asking her anything because that girl's mouth runs like a goose's butt, okay? Now, that being said, but can she do this? Can she provide this service to my company?
Can
No,
she shred paper?
she can. But, okay. There's a couple things to unpack here, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of it, right? I think that the internet, which I feel like the worst guy to talk about this of all the different discussions that are going on, right? I have heard a lot of people talk about, okay, I'm going to put my 18-month and below on payroll because they're going to do advertising. Maybe my personal vendetta against this is that I refuse to use companies that use their kids as like this ploy to get you to pay them for their services. In Ohio here, we have this, and I don't want to even say the name of the company. We got billboards all over the God's green earth, and it's a window company. Maybe you've seen them while driving. I don't know. But they have their whole family up there and like 6 kids, and they're like, come buy from us, And I'm like, no, I am never buying windows from you because you are, the word that I want to use is probably not appropriate, but you're putting your kids and your family out front to like subconsciously make you think, oh, I gotta put food on that guy's table. You know what I mean? Not doing that. So my personal opinion in using your kids for advertising, I think you probably can. There is something to be said about that. My personal opinion of would I let someone do that, I think it would come down to some facts and circumstances. I think it still comes back to, okay, how much advertising did you do? If you were to pay somebody else to do this advertising, is it equivalent to what you're giving your kid? I think that there's some nuance to that, but I think for me personally and for my own kids, because I've got my own business and so do you, as soon as my kids can provide a service for my company, I am absolutely, wholeheartedly, 100% going to put them on payroll.
Yes.
I know that my daughter will be very good on the phones, but that's like 6 to 8 years away before I can even consider that. But to me, I think there's a sweet spot. Okay, this is my opinion. When my daughter turns about 14, maybe 15, maybe 16, I'm going to give her a job. My plan is to pay her at her part-time status at about $7,000 a year at least under current law. I'm going to give her a W-2. As an S-Corp, I still have to pay workman's comp, unemployment, all that kind of stuff. If I was a Schedule C, I wouldn't have to do some of these things because I wouldn't have to pay payroll taxes on her wages if I was a Schedule C. Okay? Now, because I'm an S-Corp, I'm going to pay all of the affiliated taxes with it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have her convinced that she needs to put all of that money into a Roth. And then the deal between my daughter and I will be, if she wants something for up to $7,000, I will pay for it. So she's not losing money because she might want to buy this pair of jeans or I don't know, prom dress. I don't know. I'm way too early to even know any of the crap that she may want to buy. Okay. You can probably speak to this more than I can.
I'll tell you.
You're ahead of the curve and you're like, just wait, buddy. This is going to be terrible. But eventually what the goal is, and historically speaking with the stock market and this being in a Roth, I'm going to use approximate numbers here. But if I was to put $7,000 in for, let's say 5 years, let's just say 4 years. And yes, I'm using my adding machine for that because I'm too tired because remember, 6 and 4-year-old. So if I put $28,000 in this Roth for her, historically speaking, she's going to have close to $1 million. And if she never contributed any more money to it, by the time she gets ready to retire. Mm-hmm. I invested $28,000. I wrote off $28,000 plus my associated payroll taxes. And she's going to have $1 million in her retirement. So it's twofold. It's good. It's good for both sides. Yep. Right? From my perspective, I get a deduction. I pay the payroll on it. She puts into retirement. It's tax-free because she never paid any tax on it because it's $7,000. It's well below her standard deduction. She doesn't even have a filing requirement unless she had withholding. So to me, that's the Shangri-La situation.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yep. I mean, so yeah, you mentioned, I think it's funny, we mentioned this, my daughter's name is Kendall as well.
Yeah.
And she is a little bit older than.
Okay.
Okay.
You're not trying to date yourself here, are you?
I was very young. I was a baby when I had my babies. So,
yeah.
Anyway, absolutely. All of our kids. So my husband and I have 6 kids between the two of us, and every single one of them has been on payroll. My husband is also a tax professional. We've worked together for a very long time, and we are a blended Brady Bunch. So anyway, we have 6 kids. All of them have been on payroll because they have worked inside of our business. And interesting now is that a number of them in their adult career lives have actually chosen to come back in and work with us in the family business. So for us, it was always a matter of, just like you said, it wasn't even, there's sometimes could be a Roth option. There could be just a work and save. So we used it a lot as a forced saving, and to say, if you want to go to college, I
Yeah.
will pay you. And I will be the best job that you're probably ever going to have. And then sometimes they go out and they're like, oh, it was nice to work for you. But I will pay you and then force you to save that money for, your college tuition or your trade school or whatever it is you're going to do. And that's, kind of a way to help them get that first leg up. Because we were not the people that were going to sign on to, Parent Plus loans and all of that kind of
Right.
stuff. So that is, one thing. And I just think that there's always options with kids on payroll, and we don't, a lot of small businesses are family owned businesses. So I'm not going to be as harsh on you on the family on the billboard. I mean, I think there's like a local family that they're car dealers, and there's this little kid that's been on there since he was barely could talk, and it's like four generations. And to me, I guess part of our building our business is that it is a family business, and my goal is to transition to that next generation for them, if that's what they want. And so I see a lot of people who do create businesses and they want to have their family is involved. So we should also make sure, it's back to like what they're overlooking, is don't not pay somebody when it could actually be a benefit to you. So like you said, you could, be getting a deduction for it, or you could, force save into Roth IRAs. It just might be a way to, I always say, like, if my kids were going to have, we never gave our kids allowances,
Yeah.
but they had bank accounts at a very, very young age, as soon as I could get them one. And so that's how, if they were paid into, this was your money to be spent on whatever the things are that you want to spend it on. And, my kids are all now into college or beyond and out of the house. So with like gasoline, for instance, when you get into cars, we never gave our kids gas money. So they had from their earnings, their, debit cards and everything like that. The other thing that taught them was they had a responsibility to money, and they had to understand how banking accounts worked and charges and all of that kind of stuff. So there's multiple ways to go about that. But yeah, we absolutely should not be eliminating or forgetting about family members on payroll. But here's my caveat to that. You mentioned at the beginning, spouse on payroll. I always say, get a consult before you go throwing your spouse on payroll.
Yeah. 100%.
So it's different with kids. Like,
Yes.
the kids on payroll is a different conversation than your spouse, because sometimes I don't know what people, they're like, oh, but I wrote off, the wage to my spouse. And I'm like, I know, but you're married. And so you just literally took it from one side of the page to the other,
Right.
and you did nothing. Like, I don't know.
Right. You can kind of get in trouble with doing, not in trouble. That's the word. That's the worst word to use. You can negate some of the tax savings by giving, like, if you had this Schedule C, and then there's a cap on that self-employment tax. So
Right.
if you're paying your spouse of this, you're removing some of the cap,
Yes.
if that makes any sense. We use the percentage 15.3 almost all the time for self-employment tax. But some of these high earning Schedule C taxpayers are not really paying 15.3% on their total profit. They're paying sometimes 10, 9, 7.5, something like that, because their income is so high that the cap is there. So whenever you add the spouse on there, you're kind of you're lifting that cap a little higher. So you're going to be paying that. So it is possible, but as you said, get a consult for this, because did we even use our disclaimer today?
You know what? I'm going to record it separately. I'm going to put a disclaimer. I'll get one. I did forget that. Not particular tax advice for you. Please don't go do this.
Yeah. So here we are spewing all of this stuff, and we're like, you know what? We should do this. You know what? And you know what? We just basically
Jared told me to. I saw him on the internet.
Yeah. Jared's just adding to the wild, wild west. Look after we shoot. That works perfect. It's shoot then aim, right?
Yes.
Anyways, no, I love the idea of kids on or family members on payroll, but it's got to be the right scenario, and it should
Yep.
absolutely be discussed with I want to use the word qualified tax professional. And I'm just going to jokingly say this out loud. The example I give to everybody all the time is I don't care what alphabet soup is behind anybody's name. Like I make the joke, and I love when doctors come in, when I have client doctors, and I tell them all the time, I'm like, your industry and my industry is almost identical from the aspect that if you took 100 brain surgeons, you guys all did the same thing. But if you got in the room, you're going to know that there's a pecking order. There's people who know what the heck they're doing, and then there are people that are like, ooh, I would never go to that person for brain surgery. Our industry is the same way. You can have 100 CPAs, EAs, just uncredentialed tax people. You could have tax attorneys all in the same room. And it doesn't matter what alphabet soup you got behind your name. That does not make you a qualified tax professional. So,
Amen.
sorry, soapbox removed.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We see that a lot, and yeah, the letters after your name does not make you
Qualified.
smarter or dumber than anybody else. And I think it goes both ways. So I see this inside my own practice, and maybe it's a good segue to what we were talking about with education, because I know we're both of us big on our education in our practices. But I sometimes will encounter one of my team in particular, that he gets intimidated by people with more letters after their name or who earn a lot more dollars than
Yeah.
maybe, he has seen. And I continue to remind him to value himself. And I'm like, you know what you're doing. Do not let somebody, sort of bully you. And I have some attorneys that I like, but I see this with attorneys a lot. Like somehow the fact that they're an attorney makes them like think that they're special. And I'm like, it doesn't. I'm sorry. Like there's plenty of people in the world. Everybody's got a lane. If you're excellent at your craft, be excellent at your craft and be proud of yourself. I don't know all the things about tax, but gosh darn it, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'll go toe to toe with most people.
well, the funny thing is like, I don't know how long you've been in this industry. I've not been in this industry in retrospect, a long time. I've been in the industry since 2010, 2011, something like that.
Okay.
And in the tax industry, that I'm a baby, right? When I first became an instructor for continuing education, like I was going in at like, that was how many years ago? That'd have been 15 years ago. So I was 25. Well, no, this would have been 7 years ago. So I was like 33. Going into these rooms where these people have been doing taxes longer than I've been alive,
Yes.
and I'm the instructor.
Yes.
Like that was for the first 6 months intimidating, because these people, and they have all these letters behind their name, they've been in this industry for 60 years. But in reality, this comes back for me. I don't care about how long you've been in the industry. I don't care about what your alphabet behind your name is. This comes back to at least my mother, who is the matriarch of this business for me. She owned the business and I bought her out, but her legacy is she subjected me to things that would take somebody 30 to 40 years to gain experience in. Now, it was not easy. I'm not going to try to, sugarcoat the idea that the things that we went through as a staff and the knowledge that we gained from her and these experiences were that of somebody that had double or triple the time in this industry. So her legacy for that she's left with, at least imprinted on my DNA, is I've had more experience than other people in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And the expectations that she had of me was higher than what she probably would have put on somebody else. So
Which is pretty standard. Being a little bit of a matriarch and having multiples of my children or stepchildren work for us, I might have higher expectations of them as well.
100%.
So yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing. That's what you're, and you're saying like a legacy. I mean, your mom is still alive, sure.
Yeah, but I've actually written her eulogy like 4 times in my head, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm not like.
But you're sort of talking about her like she's gone. And I'm like,
well, she's trying to retire. I won't let her completely retire, because you just don't let that much knowledge walk out the door, right?
Yeah.
But no, I guess it's one of those things where, when you get some people that are seasoned citizens, they're like, hey, don't wait for my funeral to give me flowers. So to me, it's like, I want to honor her now.
Yeah.
And tell her how much I appreciate who she is. And she has her quirks, don't get me wrong. And I don't ever usually recommend working with family, but it's worked for us. Like it's a mutual respect thing, and I want to make sure that I give her her flowers while she's still here.
Oh, that's nice. Is she going to listen to this podcast?
I don't know. I have no
Be a
idea.
podcast person.
No, who do you think he gave me a lot of these personal? Like I said, she imprinted on my DNA. What do you think?
Yeah, so I probably know all the answers to that question.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
Yeah, so I know what you do about education inside our firm, and I think this is where, you and I have always had some good alignment here is that we're a little bit unique in the tax pro world because we do run offices with multiple people,
Yeah,
and there are a lot of tax professionals, and there's no knock on that, but they're solo operators. And we've chosen a different path. And so, in doing so, though, we have a lot of people who work for us. And the good thing about that is that we have people to sort of take some of the load.
yeah,
The burden or the responsibility is that as we elevate a firm, and I know for me, this is, what I say is that we always want to be the most knowledgeable about the situations that are coming to us. And it's very important to me that we are ahead of the curve, knowledgeable in advance, and, highly educated so that we're not sitting there saying, oh, what do you mean there was a tax bill that was passed 3.5 months ago and, it's next spring. And you're like, oh, I haven't read about the OB3 yet because I haven't, taken a class on it. And that was part of the reason I started teaching too, was that I wanted to figure out how to better communicate tax concepts in a way that met at least me and my staff, where I felt like we were having gaps because I just was sort of tired of hearing the same continuing education by people that had been in industry longer than I've been alive, but also weren't actively in industry. So I think that's a big takeaway too, is that there's plenty of people who are teaching, but they're not actively in industry, and we are doing the work and teaching about it. So what do you do inside your firm for like teaching your junioring or rising tax pros? How do you approach that for how to get your guys up to speed?
Well, my mother probably 20, 22, 24 years ago became an instructor like we are. And then and we saw in our firm for the same thing you're speaking to, an accelerated process for our firm. The added benefit for our firm is we knew what the new laws were before 90% of the country that did what we did. And when she was going to retire, I was like, "Holy crap! We need to have a backup plan. We need to have a way to replicate this, so that we can continue to receive that benefit." So that's how I jumped into this as far as a continue education instructor for taxes, because I didn't want to lose that value for our firm. One thing I can say for our firm is what we usually do. For example, when I'm home and it's the off season and we're done with tax returns, Fridays we usually have a virtual meeting where we do continuing education as an office staff between all of our three offices. Mm-hmm. So, and generally speaking, that'll be so. Like for example, last year there were in 2024 there was not a lot of new stuff tax wise. So what we did is we dove deeper on things that we felt that we were weak on. And one of the things that, I try to do as an owner of the lead goose in the Flying V is to try to figure out, what do you feel uncomfortable with? So that comes back with communication with my staff, having a platform in which they feel comfortable that they can say, hey, I don't even know how to have a conversation about a trust. I don't even know how to talk to a client about it. Okay, well, maybe we don't need to know everything about trust. Maybe I'm not going to get you here, but let's get you, this is where you're at. Let's get you to here. So we kind of pinpointed last year things that we felt we were struggling with, or as collectively whole, that we wanted to elevate ourselves on. So we did education on every Friday that I was home. So, and that's just one aspect. The other thing that I start talking about too is it's not just my job. We have team leads, which I know that you do as well, is we want to trickle that through. I can't just be the only voice of learning. You know what I mean? Our team leads do a ton of stuff, on ton of research, ton of education on their own, and then they trickle that down to everybody else. And I don't want to say it's down because it's not hierarchy, but you know what I'm saying. Like we trickle that information, that knowledge, that education down to those that maybe are. This is not derogatory, but people who are doing a job, right? Because if your only job is to, I'm going to do this every single day, and I love doing this, this is who I am personality wise, but you still need those updates. So that's how we've handled it the last, okay, I don't want to say this negatively. Prior to me doing it this way, it was a little bit of chaos. It was as soon as something came out, boom, we knew. But it was not organized in the way that I've tried to organize it personally. Speaking of which, I don't know if you've heard, but the Treasury just came out with the listed of tips industry. Did you see that?
I did see that like yesterday or the day before. I read that yesterday. I
Yep.
thought that's a whole episode. We're gonna unpack it because there is so much fun in who now is a tipped.
Yeah.
We will be accepting tips for our podcast because content creators are considered
Who knew?
can be tipped. So we'll accept tips on, I don't even know where. How do we get them?
You're gonna ask me about Venmo or something like that, and I'm like, I used to tell clients all the time we take all forms of payment with exception to hugs. Well, this was prior to Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and any of that other stuff. So we don't have any of that stuff. No, I wish. Prior to nothing. Never mind. No.
Oh, yeah,
No.
I love it. So we'll unpack that because content creators, but there's some interesting stuff to unpack there. So we'll shelf that. That's a whole nother awesome conversation.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think I agree with you. We focus a lot on education too in our firm, and I love the younger generation, and I think it's interesting right now. There's a lot of people that are super, and maybe this is my little chip on my shoulder. So I've heard a saying sometimes, like, don't mess with somebody who's got a chip, and that kind of feels like me sometimes. Is that I was really young when I started in industry, and so I started when I was 19, and I have been around a minute, but I had like a lot to overcome because I looked very young, and I still look really young, but I looked really, really young, and I very quickly was figuring out all of these parts of the tax code because I was a kind of a nerd, and I just always felt like nobody took me seriously for the longest time because they kept sort of discounting me because of my age. And so as a result, now being on the mid end of the spectrum, I love hiring young people either right out of high school, right out of college, and I tell them, I just told one of my new juniors yesterday, I said, I know this is a crazy hard concept, and I was telling her about self rentals, which 99% of current operating tax professionals maybe have no idea about. And I said, I know that I'm throwing a ton at you, but I expect you to be amazing in a very short period of time. Like, we will overwhelm you with the knowledge, and she'll be completely operational with clients. I think maybe a little bit next year, but definitely within 2 to 3 years. Absolutely. Like, and because we just pour and pour and pour. So we do like weekly education minutes inside of our weekly team meetings. And then everybody, same thing, has a mentor. They're learning. We're, encouraging further credentialing and pushing you through continuing education, like all of that. And then not just continuing education, specific education that is higher level, get more, find it to what you want to learn about, go for those hard concepts, unpack it with somebody else. Like, I think it just makes us better, but I think you can do it a lot faster than people give people credit for.
100%.
And
I'm living proof of that.
Yeah, and we empower people to take like authority over it. So I had this little like random, I'm on Twitter or X, whatever, I think maybe, did you join?
I think so.
Okay, I think you joined. And I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago, and somebody was kind of like, oh, nobody under 10 years in industry can be signing a tax return independently. And I was like, hell no. Like, there's no way that I could wait 10 years to get somebody up and running. And, I just think you can do it in a much quicker period of time with the right mentorship. And maybe that's the reason is it's the large firm CPA model is that there's no autonomy to
No.
anybody. They have like, oh, I input, then I have a reviewer, then I have a second reviewer, then I have a manager, then I have a partner. Nobody talks to each other. I don't know. There's like 14 checks to get a freaking 1040 across the finish line. Like, no wonder they have to charge ridiculous prices.
Right. Well, you kind of hit on this. I got a story from Dayton, Ohio. I was teaching for an organization, and like I said, when I started being an educator, I was 33, and I walked into this room, and there was probably 40 people in this room. That's a smaller organization, and the average age in that room was above 60. And I had a guy come up to me afterwards and said, Jared, I literally walked in the room, saw your face at the front of the room, is like, what the hell is this guy going to teach me? Right? And he says, I got to apologize up front. I was judging you before you said a word. And he says, it was very clear that you knew what the heck you were talking about, and you taught us concepts. And I guarantee you people in here that have been in this industry longer than you've been alive learned something today. And I'm not trying to give myself a big head, but it was one of those things where just because you're knowledgeable does not make you a good educator. And just because you're a good educator does not make you knowledgeable. It's the coupling of the two things. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I feel like from a business standpoint, having all these checks and balances where nobody can sign a tax return until it's gone through these three people is a huge waste of my time and resources, right? No client can pay me in time. So every single, like, for example, like our training, I don't know how you do training, but like when I get somebody in here that wants to do taxes, here's our model. They come in and they sit down beside me while I do a tax return. For 50 tax returns, they watch me just do that. They don't speak unless they're spoken to or have a question, but they just watch, right? I'm not saying they're not allowed to talk. I'm saying that they don't feel empowered to add anything to the conversation, right?
I'm just envisioning Jared like, don't speak. Do not speak to me.
But after those 50 tax returns, we'll move seats. So the next 50 tax returns, that person sits in my seat and literally data enters everything. And I'm watching that person do all this tax return, but they're not speaking yet. I'm still asking the questions. I'm still communicating with the client. I'm still double checking that tax return. And after those 50 tax returns, for the next 100 tax returns, they do both. We're a little bit unique in our firm that we sit across from our clients and we ask questions. I argue that you can't do an accurate tax return without asking a bunch of questions. And from a time management standpoint, I'd rather do that with the client there because I can be more efficient. I can finish that tax return in one sitting if we've got everything, ask all my questions, make sure there's nothing missing, then they walk out the door. That's efficient for the client and efficient for me. But if you had all of these people this has got to run through, that's a problem. I will tell you with my Cincinnati office for example, once we get through those 200 tax returns with a new person, I either trust them or I don't, right?
Yeah.
I know. With my Cincinnati office, I can't just sit with them because it's so geographically far away. So what I do is I've taught them the first two parts, right? And on the third part, where they're doing it all themselves, I double check all of those tax returns for data entry, making sure that they have things in the right place, making sure there's nothing that stands out. And until I can see about 100 tax returns that they've not maybe done something a little bit unique, I don't trust them. But after that 200 tax returns, I set them free. They're on their own. And they know when they have to ask questions, when they have to stop, when they have to come back and be reeled in a little bit. So that's another pet peeve for me when I hear about all these firms that are like, oh yeah, I've never signed a tax return in my life. What?
I tried to hire a manager level this past year, went through a series of interviews before I finally gave up because the people that were coming from various firms, and you know, my firm is we we'll get into it, like, but we do it a little bit different. But anyway, I needed somebody who was going to be like, I'm going to hand you a book of clients, and I expect you to get them done basically during the season, interviewing them and all of that, and with, you know, the parameters of maybe there's the hands off things that you don't know, but I need the majority of this work done. And so to me, that's a manager level person, because you're going to have some experience. Multiple people were like, oh, I said, well, you know, tell me about, and they're all credentialed, never signed a tax return. I'm like,
Nope.
I'm sorry, what? I'm like, oh yeah, and oh, that's, you know,
Red
gotta
flag.
be, and I just, it's like the same thing. I'm like, so how is this less work for me? You know, so I mean, God bless you. You're sitting next to people for, my staff would laugh hearing this right now. I am not sitting next to anybody for 50 tax returns. I'm more of a, here it is, do the best you can, and then I'll tell you how to go through, you know, kind of and check and balance what you did. And I use it in, like, that's how I review them. So like they'll input and I'm like, okay, this needs the addressed, you know, we have to ask about this, we have to look at this, this needs to tie to this, you know, kind of, I go through it on that in a series of them, and then I push them back onto their way. So I'm very much like, push, figure it out, and then come back to me.
Yeah, I agree with you that we do the same thing. Is like, once we've, especially on new concepts or things that we want people to figure out, and you may be a little different, but all of us have done taxes in our firm, have done them on paper. Like, we
I've never done
learn,
a tax return on paper.
we don't actually do the tax returns on paper, but that's how
I
we
could.
learn.
I
We
could do
learn.
it on paper.
You see what I'm saying? But like, that process of going
Yeah,
through and learning things on
that's
paper,
true.
you learn, and you're not a slave to a software.
That's true.
So, yeah, and I will tell you, at least you hire people with past experience. My biscuits have been burned every time by that. Every time. I do not usually ever hire anybody with previous experience. Like, I jokingly say that some of our best employees were stay-at-home moms or math teachers. You know what I mean? They don't have, I don't like the idea of trying to reteach someone's brain how to get out of bad habits.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, there is, some people have, you know, kind of come through one mode of operation, and then to change it is hard. So yeah, we'll unpack hiring in another episode.
Another day.
Lots of things we could go down. Okay, well, I'm gonna shelf us because in the interest of time, we've been rambling for a minute. So I hope that we gave you some tidbits today on what we wish our small business taxpayers knew. I had my little, you know, kind of takeaway is that for us, at least, small business owners hold up our local communities. We don't want you to leave any meat on the bone. We want you to get all the tax deductions that you're supposed to. Hopefully you took something away from it. And if you like us, Unplugging the Tax World, please like, subscribe, or do all the things you're supposed to do on some of the platforms, and maybe leave us a tip, because maybe we can make that tax free.
You know who's probably going to sponsor us? That window company that I despise.
Ah, man. Now you're making enemies, and we're not
No,
even, you know, come on now. No.
they don't even know who I am or who I'm talking about, so it's fine.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.